teenager named Paul Williams started Crawdaddy magazine. Launched in January 1966 by the precocious 17-year-old Swarthmore College student Crawdaddy, was the first American magazine to take rock music seriously. This was the era of Teen Beat and Tiger Beat, when pop stars were likely to be asked about their favorite color rather than what inspired their creativity. Writer-editor Paul Williams, who died on Wednesday last year at the age of 64, changed all that by asking burgeoning legends like Brian Wilson and David Crosby what they were really thinking about. Amazingly, Williams, still totally unknown at that point, was able to invite himself into recording studios for impromptu and candid conversations with the Beach Boys, Crosby, Stills and Nash, an era that predated the personal manager, the publicist, and the bodyguard. That was written by Pat Thomas. Originally, Crawdaddy was solely written, edited, and published by Williams in his dorm room. But within 18 months, it grew into a real venture with an office and staff in New York City, which provided music journalists like Peter Graumick, John Landau, and Richard Meltzer, and others with their first writing outlet. Williams' success, but not his talent, peaked early. By 1969, he achieved legendary status by accompanying LSD guru Timothy Leary to John Lennon and Yoko Ono's hotel room in Montreal, where he participated in the Bed-In for Peace, recording of the seminal anti-war chant, "Give Peace a Chance." And also, Paul was a literary executor of and friend to the late great science fiction writer Philip K. Dick. By 1968, he left Crawdaddy in New York City and joined several rural communes, wrote a little book of thoughts called Das Energy, which I have back there, which became an underground bestseller, and the first and probably, I think, only book released by Elektra Records. It was the first of several kinds of books he called Practical Philosophy. Paul was a rabid Bob Dylan fan, going to hundreds of concerts and writing a series of books called Bob Dylan Performing an Artist. The third and the final in the series came out in 2003. That was his last book, and he was working on a fourth. He passed away a year ago, March. So at this point, I'd like to introduce these guys who I feel honored to have come and speak to you today and discuss Paul. In the middle here we have David Frick. He's a senior writer at Rolling Stone magazine, where he writes predominantly on rock music. His career has spanned over 30 years. He also writes Frick's Picks Radio, a podcast, and the Alternate Take blog in Rolling Stone. And he says, regarding his work at the magazine, I wouldn't be there if not for Paul. Ann Power has been writing about popular music and society for various publications like the New York Times, Blender Magazine, and the Village Voice since the early 1980s. She currently writes for NPR Music and is a contributor to the Times. She's also the author of several books, including Weird Like Us, My Bohemian America, and is co-editor of Rock, She Wrote. Women write about rock, pop, and rap. Ed Ward is a writer and radio commentator, known since 1986 as the rock and roll historian for NPR's program Fresh Air, one of the original founders of Austin's South by Southwest Music Festival. He began his music writing career in 1965 and has been and was on the staff of Crawdaddy in 1966. He was also in Rolling Stone and Cream magazine. He was also at the Austin American Statesman, the local daily, until 1984, and the Austin Chronicle from 1984 to 93. Paula, you have to tell me how to say your last name.
Mejia.
Paula Mejia is an arts journalist and culture critic. Her writing has appeared in Spin, Rookie, the AV Club, Time, Interview Magazine, and others. She originally hails from Houston, Texas, and is in her final semester of her master's at George Washington University. Let's thank these cool guys for coming. So I thought it's time for me to stop talking, and what I'd like to hear from you guys is, first of all, if you met Paul Williams, how did you meet him? And how did you become, or how did you become aware of his writings?
Well, maybe I should start because I was there at the beginning, almost at the beginning. Had been writing some stuff for a shall we say left wing. It was actually Communist Party folk music magazine called Broadside, and I'd been very carefully following popular music because it seemed to me that was where the action was, as opposed to folk music. And I was working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Went to Antioch College, and they would get you a job every other quarter. You go out, and it was supposed to be about what you were doing, but they could never place me. So here I am doing the stock boy gig at the Christmas card department of the Metropolitan Museum, and I'm reading the Village Voice, and there was a gossip column which went through several different hands. I'm not sure who was writing it at that point, but I was reading it one week, and it said, behind a door in the Greenwich Village apartment on Avenue, an 18-year-old ego burns. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm 18, but and it turns out the guy was not really impressed with Paul's saying he was going to make people take rock music seriously, but that's what Paul was saying. So I would really like to find this magazine, but of course I couldn't because they had no distribution. Anyway, my last day at the museum, I had a sort of a party. My co-worker was an artist who lived uptown, and I had obtained tickets for a show headlining with Tom Rush opening at Town Hall, which is a performance space in New York. And I had gone to buy the tickets, and I knew the woman in the box office from another job I'd had, and she said, "Man, press isn't getting these tickets at all. I have a lot of press tickets, and so for the price of a far up in the balcony ticket, I'll sell you a couple on the floor right close to the stage." Sure, because I was going to impress my girlfriend, who was the daughter of a very hip guy, a cultural gadfly whose day job was about designing stuff like book covers, but who was always buzzing around trying to find out what was happening. And he had brought home a book. He went to Macmillan Press to talk to them about something. They treated him very badly, and at one point, the guy he was talking to said, I got to go for a minute, but don't leave. And so he thought, God, these people are such jerks. And he was looking at the guy's desk, and he saw there was a bound galley of a book by Bob Dylan called Tarantula. And he thought, oh, well, my daughter really is into him. So he picked the thing up and put it in his bag and left. Basically stole it. And he also stole a couple of buttons with a picture of Bob Dylan on it that said Tarantula. And I should have brought mine in. Yeah, I've got one, I think, still at home. Anyway, so here we were at this show, and Tom Rush played his thing. And in between sets, we were down in the press section, and this guy behind us, this sort of skinny guy, stood up, and he was really intently looking at the crowd. And every now and again, he'd see somebody, he'd jump up, and he'd pull out this magazine, and he'd hand it to them. And then he'd go back to the seat and keep looking around to see who the important people were. And so I said, "Are you involved in Crawdaddy magazine?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I have something you might be interested in. My girlfriend here has a copy of a book by Bob Dylan." He goes, "I'm sure if Bob Dylan was doing a book, I would know about it." And she had this great way of just being this innocent little girl. She looked at me, "But he is doing what? And I do have it." And Paul, and he says, "Okay, can you bring it by the office?" And I was looking for a job, because I just lost my job. And I said, "Yeah, sure, this will take a little bit of effort, but I gotta go to New Jersey, and I'm living up in Westchester, but next time I'm over at her house, I'll grab this thing. So a couple of days later, I showed up at the office on 6th Avenue, which was of the West 4th Street subway station, on the same side of the street. I guess that would be the west side of the street, and Greek diner downstairs, and this tiny little apartment where Paul was living, and went up there, and it was him and this guy with a whole bunch of curly hair who was almost blind, named Tim Juergens. And so I handed him the book, and he says, "Do you mind if I hold on to this? I can take it up to Electra Records, and I can make copies of it." I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I would then go, and I would spend the day looking for work and not find any. At the end of the afternoon, I would go down to the Crawdaddy office and hang out and talk with Paul and Tim. And finally, he copied the book, so I had my own copy, and I could take the other one back to New Jersey. And I said, "Well, what are you guys doing here?" And he said, "Well, we're very slowly, we're making of the magazine, but we don't have enough stuff." I said, "Well, I can write, and I can also type, if you need." Because the way they were making the magazine was they were typing the pages. They were laying them out first. They had the photograph, so it'd be these penciled corners like this, where they would paste the photograph on after the copy had been typed. And it was an incredibly stupid way to make a magazine, but it was, I guess, the only way he could take the technology he knew from fanzines and kick it up one step. So anyway, I finally said, I should probably. And Paul said, "We can't pay you, but every morning we get